Hi, I'm Holly Morrison with the Goshen team, and welcome back into my kitchen. Today, we're going to do something that I absolutely adore. We're going to talk about how to make bone broth. And we're going to talk about why you want to make it, how to incorporate it into your diet, what the benefits are to drinking it and eating it. It is a real food. It is powerful for healing, and it tastes wonderful. So come on into my kitchen and let's do some cooking together. I'd like to spend a little bit of time and just tell you why you want to drink bone broth. I've been drinking bone broth really probably most of my adult life and didn't know it. I would cook a chicken and have broth, and I would use that to make soup. But when you prepare it properly and traditionally, our ancestors have been making bone broth for thousands of years, honestly. And I mean, all cultures have been making it with whatever remnants are left of an animal, like the carcass. And they cook it very low and slow. And by doing that, you're preserving all of the nutrients that are in there. And there's tons of minerals, there's amino acids, there's magnesium, phosphorus, there's like tons of amazing minerals. But I think the most health benefit thing in there is the gelatin. And what gelatin does for your body is it preserves it. It preserves your gut, it seals your gut, it reverses leaky gut syndrome. If you don't know what that is, you can look it up. But if you have any issues with digesting grains or digesting food or any diverticulitis, there's lots of gut issues that can be going on in your tummy. But it is so nutrient dense and it's so digestible. It is actually considered a first food for a toddler or like a baby that's transitioning off of nursing. Bone broth is considered a first food. For people like me, I'm in my early 50s and I drink it for the joint health. I've had a wreck a long time ago and had a lot of issues with joints and with arthritis, and the bone broth has been miraculous for my joints. I mean, like powerful. And when I'm neglecting drinking it or neglecting getting it in my body, I can tell. So it is just powerful for any autoimmune disorder, any gut issue, but it's really fantastic for your children. Fantastic for making your bones be strong and your hair and your nails. Anything that makes your nails and your hair healthy is making your bones and your teeth healthy. So it is also part of a protocol for people that are healing their teeth. Obviously, if our ancestors were doing it and there were things they were not battling, they were not battling a lot of the diseases that we battle. They were battling infectious diseases. They were not dealing with degenerative diseases like, the osteoarthritis and, there's so many. I don't even want to go into the long list, but like any of those diseases where it's just because our body is just breaking down. They were not battling that. They were dealing with infections that were coming because they had no knowledge of how to prevent infections. So bone broth rocks. It is amazing for your health. It's amazing for growing babies. If you're pregnant or nursing moms, there's not a person on this planet that cannot benefit from drinking at least a cup to 2 cups a day. A lot of people talk about how to put it up after you've made it. Our family consumes it. It's never sitting in the freezer. We make soup out of it. We make faux noodles out of it. We'll just sip it and add a little bit of seasoning to it. But it's not going to be hard for you to work it into your diet. So we're going to get cooking. I have got a lot of ingredients over here, and it's really not a lot. It's actually quite simple, but I'm going to bring them out. I like to cook with herbs, and when I make bone broth, I put herbs in there. So these are my favorites. They're all organic. I buy them in bulk. Rosemary, which we crush with a mortar and pestle because it's really hard to find it already crushed. And yeah, these are components of my bone broth every time, and I've been making bone broth for years. This is just parsley, flat leaf parsley. It's organic again, and thyme. And they're well loved. I probably should have wiped my containers off, but they're used nearly every day. And then pepper. And no, that's not organic. I just find that's not a high spray item, so I don't worry about it. And then we're going to need organic, unfiltered, raw apple cider vinegar. And I just use the good stuff for everything. I mean, I imagine you could just use standard vinegar, but I always try to stick with organic, especially when it doesn't make a difference in price, because This is just pennies to get that. So all of these are going to go into our bone broth. I'm going to move these over to the side because what we have cooking already over here is a pot of chicken. I have found by accident what is the most effective way to make chicken bone broth. Found it out a few years ago, and I used to make barbecue chicken in the crock pot with drumsticks. And so I would just put the drumsticks in the crock pot, cover it with barbecue sauce, and let it cook for 7 hours on low. And one day we had a little bit left over, which is rare in my family. And I put it all in the refrigerator and I just scooped it all up, threw it in the fridge. And the next day as I'm getting it out, I'm like, look at all this gelatin. It was barbecue gelatin. And I was like, this is the best way to make gelatin. Bone broth, because that's what you're after when you're making bone broth, is you're after the gelatin. You want your broth to gelatinize. You want it to be thick. So my trick for making really gelatinous bone broth is using drumsticks or leg quarters. But I find drumsticks are the cheapest, they're the easiest to find, and they make the richest, nutrient-dense bone broth that you can ever make. And I mean, hands down, there's lots of other ways, but this is the least expensive organic chicken bone broth you can ever make. So we're going to begin with an empty crock pot, and we're going to put in the crock pot 3 packs of drumsticks. And the way I buy them is usually at Costco. That's the cheapest place to find them. They come in a tri-pack, and each pack has 5 drumsticks, usually. Occasionally there's 6. Or I'll buy them at Trader Joe's. I always buy organic. You want organic bones. You really do not want to fudge on, this is the area that you don't want to, fudge on. This is where you want to buy organic meat, organic bones. So we're taking the drumsticks, putting them in your crock pot, a cold crock pot, and then we're going to put on top of the drumsticks, we're going to put a whole head of garlic and some veggie scraps. And I have a little trick because I don't like to put food in there to cook down and then throw it away, because when you let food cook down for a long period of time, you're not going to eat it. So like if you put a whole carrot in there, whole pieces of celery, you're not going to eat that after it's cooked for a long period of time because it's just mush. So what I do is when I've chopped up my vegetables, when I'm cooking supper, is I keep a little bag in my freezer, a gallon bag or sandwich bags, it doesn't matter. And just every time I'm done peeling an onion, I put all those veggie scraps, as that you would call them, put them in the bag. You don't have to wash them, you don't have to do anything to them, just put them in the bag, throw them in your freezer, and then when it's time to make bone broth, you just open your freezer out, and there you've got the ends of celery, the ends of your onions, the peelings. The peelings are leftover pieces of garlic, and your carrot tops, the ends of the carrots. There's other things you can put in too. Some things you don't want to put in are like potatoes. Bell peppers are great too. I love to put bell peppers in because then it's just the pieces of the bell pepper that obviously you're not eating. So all of those are your veggie scraps. And that is really common in restaurants where they take veggie scraps and they use them and they make broth out of them. So it's just a cost-effective way to add flavor and nutrition to your bone broth. So this is my crock pot. I'm unplugging it. It has been on low for the last 8 hours. Now that's the longest you're going to cook it with chicken, because we don't want to waste our money. We are cooking low and slow so that we preserve all the nutritional benefits. I wish you could smell this. I take my lid off. I'm going to keep my lid clean because we're going to put that back on. Because we've put all of our chicken in, and oh my gosh, this smells so heavenly. I put, as you saw earlier, a whole head of garlic. Now that garlic right now, I can just cut the end off and squeeze all that out. That's garlic paste that's been cooking in chicken. These are just all the veggies that you saw in the picture that were put on top. And then here is your beautiful chicken. Tender, cooked perfect. And then there's all that gold in there. So we're gonna pour that off, but first thing first, I'm gonna collect some of this. And I'm only doing this because I wanna show you how gelatinous this is. So I'm putting this in. That's going to push down all my veggie scraps. And I'm going to collect some just for you to see the beautiful color. But I'm going to put this in the refrigerator. I'm going to let it cool down for a little bit first. But I'm going to put it in the refrigerator and I'm going to let it cool, and then I want you to see how gelatinous it turns once it gets cold. because when you cook with these drumsticks, this is really the key. It's just amazing how much gelatin comes out of those really large bones. So yeah, that's like such a happy discovery, because I used to make bone broth and I still kept making it even though it wasn't gelatinous, and I would read, well, you know, if it doesn't get gelatinous, you can just add some gelatin to it. And I'm like, if I went to all this trouble and I didn't make gelatinous bone broth, why do I want to go to all this trouble? It's not really that hard. You'll learn a rhythm to it, but I want it to be what it's supposed to be. So I'm going to put that in the fridge in just a little bit. So I'll set that over here and let it cool. And now what we're going to do is we're going to pour this all off in a colander. And that's not a fine colander, so if I had put bell peppers in there, you would want to run it back through a fine sieve like this, because there's seeds that come through the bell peppers. But I'll show you that in just a minute. So we're gonna just keep going. So here's my colander, here's my bowl. I'll set that right there. We're gonna try not to splash, but you know, real life, right? So we're gonna just take it right out of my crock pot. And here we go. We're just going to pour it in slow. It is very hot, so slow is good. Now what are we going to do with all this chicken? It's chicken that's going to pull apart. It's not going to be big chunks, but it can be. All right, so your crock pot looks very dirty, but guess what? It's clean enough to start your next batch of bone broth. So the rhythm of bone broth is that this is your first batch. You're going to cook it about 7 hours on low with meat, because that's how I always make my bone broth. I'm starting with meat. So all of this is going to drain off. This is going to cool off. And I'm going to just put this right over here just for a minute, because I need to grab a bowl to set that on. Not a bowl, but a plate. And it's going to keep dripping. So we'll set that right there. This is going to cool. And in the time that we're recording this, once this cools all the way down, I'm going to debone that. And everything but the meat goes right back into this crock pot that looks like it's dirty, but it's not, because we're going to put it all back in and we're going to turn it back on. But this time, you're going to run it for 24 hours. Now you can go as long as 48 hours. I personally don't. I like the taste after that first 24 hours. You can pull the liquid off and start all over again and put more liquid in and let it go another 24 hours. But I prefer the first round, which is 7 hours with meat. And then this is bone broth right here. So this is going to be gelatinous. And I just pour it off. Now I often make soup out of this. So it's going to go in my mason jar or back into a soup pot, you know. So we're going to pour it right in here, carefully of course. And there will be a fat layer at the top. You can pour that, you can use that fat layer to cook with. Or you can just leave it in here. And there's going to be all of my herbs that I put in there initially. They're going right back in because I paid money for those and they're in good shape. So, and isn't that beautiful? Let me pull that around so you can see how pretty it is. Now that is delicious right now. You do not put salt in when you're cooking it initially. So pretty. Oh my goodness. So, but this is the time where you're going to salt it. So about a teaspoon per quart. This is obviously a half a gallon, so this is 2 quarts. So, but I don't just put salt in like that, because like when I'm cooking, I'm sauteing vegetables and I'm putting salt in there. So I season at the end. I like my bone broth to stay salt-free. Okay, so here is my head of garlic. Now I have not done that until recently. I used to buy my garlic from Costco and it would already be peeled. I always try to find garlic that has the roots on it. That reassures you that it has been grown properly. If it hasn't been grown properly, they'll scoop that off. This is organic, so I got this whole head and got a big bag of them, or you know, good sized bag of one. But we're going to just cut off part of this at some point. I'll do that while we're here, and you're going to just squeeze it, and all that wonderful chicken garlic paste is going to come out. Now, this is not something that I would recommend doing when you're doing the longer broth. This is your first 7 to 8 hour broth. This is why you still have meat on the bones. So your garlic is not going to be overcooked. but when you go to do it with your longer broth, you can still put garlic in. You're just not going to necessarily eat the garlic. So here's our chicken, and I'm actually going to take it out and let it cool down, and it's just going to fall right off the bones. Now, what am I doing with this chicken? There's your meat right there. Very tender, very moist. Dark meat is very moist. You can make chicken salad out of it. If you don't know what you want to do with it, you can just debone it. Take all that, because all these bones are going to go right back in this crock pot. But here's your chicken, and if you're not ready to use that in a meal, then you can just put it in a Ziploc bag. It will fill up a quart bag. So this amount of chicken, and I know pounds, everybody wants to know pounds. It's 3 packs of the Trader Joe's organic chicken. So 15 drumsticks is what I have here. And 15 drumsticks, when I debone it, it ends up filling up a quart bag. And I will put that in the freezer sometime, and that will be my convenience food when I'm in a hurry and I want to come home and pull something together. There it is. I can just defrost it the night before or put it in some warm water. So I'm laying these out only purely to let them cool down, so that I can debone them, because these bones are not done. They still have a lot more love to give to us, a lot more nutrition. And as you can see, there's the cartilage, the skin, all that's going in there. Now, I don't reuse the vegetables. Once they've given me one round, that's it. You can, if a few of them fall through, that's not a big deal. So I'm just spreading these out on a plate so that in about 10 minutes, I can take all my chicken off and put my bones and skin and cartilage back in the crock pot. So the rest of this I'm just going to leave spread out in here. And the cool thing is I got a plate under there, so it's collecting all this underneath. That in a short amount of time will turn into gelatin. So this is some rich broth. Oh, and that is actually the end of my celery. And so again, I just keep a little bag. I'll get that out when we go to set this up. I'll show you how I collect them in my freezer bag and just put them in the fridge. Put them in the freezer. All right, so we're gonna transition to deboning these and setting up our crock pot for our second round of bone broth. So the first batch, the most flavorful, most nutrient dense, most lovely. You're not gonna have to talk anybody into drinking that. Second batch is going to be tasty. It's still gonna taste like chicken, but it's going to be a little bit more blank, but it is still very nutrient dense, and it is worth the trouble to do this second batch. Okay, I'm gonna finish deboning this. So it's still pretty warm, but it's not piping hot. So I'll use my tongs a little bit, and I'm just gently, there's bones in here, so just be watchful. Just to encourage you, there's these little bones right here. So you wanna be watchful that you get all of that. That's all going back in the crock pot. Here's my pile that's gonna go for a dinner or a meal or a casserole or a pot of soup. And there's all the skin. And obviously I've got 15 of these. So I'm gonna just keep on going and deboning everything and getting it great. But again, watch for the little bones. And there's your chicken. I don't even chop it. I just put it right in my Ziploc bag or right in the soup just like that. And I will just keep on going. So here's our whole head of garlic, and it is cooked in chicken. So the flavor in this is just amazing. So you basically have garlic paste, passively made for you, really super easy. Now I'm cutting it real careful because it's cooked. So if I just went like that, everything would have squeezed out all at once. And I didn't want it to do that because I really wanted to show you how to do this. Okay, so now that you've cut your ends off, all you're gonna do is squeeze, and there's your garlic paste coming out. Now, you can do whatever you want with this. It's gold. It's flavor, but it is incredible nutrition. That's a whole head of garlic. Nobody's gonna have trouble eating that, I promise you, because it tastes like chicken and garlic. There's no heat anymore. It's all calmed down. I'm not gonna reuse this. Some people reuse their vegetables. I just think, I've got veggie scraps in my freezer. All of it would have otherwise been composted. So I don't have to get, mincy with it, but there's probably more flavor in that you could have kept on cooking, but I'm not gonna do that. There's a little bit of paste here, but I'm trying to avoid the paper. So you still can get some garlic paste out of this too. But you're probably gonna be more likely to get some paper, your garlic paper in that. Now you could have just peeled the garlic and put it in. I've done it that way too. Or I've already bought it already peeled. But this is just one little trick that I'm doing, and we're always learning, right? All right, now we're setting our bones up for the second batch of bone broth. So the first batch we cooked with our meat. which is gold. It is gold. You're not going to have anybody not drink that. The second batch, it's not going to be as chickeny. So I've got some tips on how to still make that taste just as good as the first batch. So here we are. We have put all of our skin, cartilage, and bone, a few pieces of chicken that just, I mean, not pieces of chicken. Yes, there are a few pieces of chicken, which is fine. It's going to add flavor. There's a few carrots that got back in there, which will be fine. But everything that was not to be eaten goes right back in that crock pot. And now here's all my veggie scrap bags that I was telling you about. So every time I chop up an onion, celery, and we do eat a lot of onions and celery, we save them, and then those are going to go right in. They're frozen, and they're just going to get dropped right in. The more the merrier. You really, honestly, in my opinion, you can't overdo it. And then these are just celery ends. I just cut the ends off of your celery. And that goes in, and then I cut the other end off of the celery. So there we go. We just do dump. There's some carrot pieces in here, so I'll get some of the carrots in there. I probably won't do any more celery, even though I love celery. Celery and bone broth and garlic and bone broth and onions. Those are like happy. I don't do a ton of carrots because carrots are sweet. So I think they do have a tendency to change the broth a little. And there's a few more onions. We'll add those in. And why not? We'll just add that last little bit of celery. So those are empty. The last thing I'm going to add, and when I add garlic in, when I do it as a whole head, in order to actually consume the garlic, you want to pull that back out after about 6 hours. So I'm going to grab a head of garlic, and we're going to put it in just like that. I put it right to the top so it's easy to pull back out. And I will set a timer on my phone so I don't forget. Because, you know, garlic is gold. It's good for you. I don't have any bell peppers because we've used those in the last batch that I made a while ago. So that's all gone. So now I'm going to add, this is a secret ingredient. And you hear a lot of people use vinegar in it, but sometimes I never hear people talk about it. So, but this is just organic apple cider vinegar. You're going to put a 1/4 cup in. Why are we putting this in? It's not for flavor. This is actually going to help the bones leach more of the nutrients that we want out. So we put that in, and then I add all my herbs. I love rosemary. It smells amazing. My daughter loves to use the mortar and pestle, so I buy it whole, and then we just crush it. And I put about a teaspoon in there. And then thyme, which is all of these herbs, all herbs are anti-cancer, and they're therapeutic and medicinal, but they add flavor. So there's our thyme, smells great. And then parsley. And I add parsley. You're getting potassium in your parsley. You're not really getting a lot of flavor from parsley. It's just minerals and nutrients. And it's a green. Parsley is a green, so anytime I can add greens, and so all these herbs are actually a green. All right, and then now we're going to add clean water. I just ran this water through, this is a Berkey water filter. It removes all the junk, but leaves all the minerals. So clean water. We're pouring that in. Now I cover it. And you're covering your bones by about 2 inches. So you don't have to cover your vegetables. Your vegetables are going to settle down in. So that's about 2 inches. We'll just go ahead and do the rest of it. I don't normally measure it. I just put it underneath the Berkey and turn it on. And now that you're going to let sit for about an hour before you turn it on, because the vinegar and the water is going to leach out all the minerals that's in the bones. And then let me put the lid back on, and we're not going to turn it on yet. I'm going to turn it on because I want to let you watch how I set it up. This is actually the promised quart of chicken, and it's in big pieces, as you can see. I love to put chicken in soup where it's chunky, and it'll just fall apart over time while the other things in there are cooking. And I've got some great recipes for soups that we can do, but I don't want to take up all our time with this. So we're going to turn this on. Well, we're going to plug it back in. Then we're going to turn this on. And we're going to put it on low. And the way that mine works, I just go backwards and then add a little bit. And there's my 24 hours. And mine goes to warm afterwards. And then we're going to do the same thing we did before. We're going to strain it off, except we're not going to debone it. If you will cook everything in this pot one more time. So we're going to cook this 24 hours. We're going to strain it. And there's our broth. You're going to have almost, not quite, but you're going to have almost another half a gallon of bone broth. Now it's, again, not going to be as gelatinous as the first round. But it's not going to be as flavorful, in my opinion, the second batch. But I add this little item. You always add salt at the end before you get ready to use it. But this is just a wonderful product. You can get it at Whole Foods, kind of costly. You can get it at Costco in a really big tub, but my teenager has learned this trick. So he'll add this to water and it makes like delicious broth, but it's not necessarily like bone broth, but we run out of bone broth. So this is what he does. So we just add this in, about a teaspoon per cup, and the flavor is off the charts good. I mean, it would take somebody who really cooked a lot and who's cooked a lot of broths not to be able to tell that that was not homemade broth. But what it does is it takes this second batch of broth and it makes it taste just like the first batch. And obviously the first batch was super golden. Your second batch is going to be a whole lot lighter in color. And there won't be as much fat because, you know, that was all pulled off mostly with the first round of cooking. Here is the finished product. We popped it in the freezer just to get her gelatinized for you. But as you can see, we have bone broth gelatin. There's the gold. This is what changes your health. And for anybody getting over a cold or the flu, sip on some of this. So there it is. Isn't that beautiful? Little fat beads on top. Yeah. Now obviously you'll have to warm that back up, but as soon as you warm it up, it will just melt like butter. There we go. Beautiful. That is going to make all kinds of goodness in a pot of soup. Just warm it up and sip it and enjoy. But simmer your veggies with it. I mean, you can put it in everything. You're warming up some rice, warm up leftovers. You know, you can actually freeze it off in some ice cubes, or you could freeze it in Ziploc bags or mason jars and put it in your freezer if you need it. But my encouragement is use it up in 5 days so that you need to put another batch on and just keep it rolling. It's winter, so it's super easy to drink something warm and toasty. Thank you for coming into my kitchen. Thank you for watching our video on how to make organic, wonderful chicken bone broth. And if you liked our video, please give us a thumbs up. Please hit the subscribe button and the notification bell so that you'll find out when we do produce another video. And if you've got any comments, please put them below and we'll try to answer every single one of them. Thank you for coming into my kitchen, and thank you for following along our journey to Goshen.